Two rock legends, one legendary guitar, and an auction battle no one saw coming. The competition unfolding in this prestigious hall in the heart of London would become a clash not just of money, but of passion, nostalgia, and two massive egos. Because sometimes the most valuable things gain meaning not from owning them, but from why you want to own them. Sotheby's auction house was filled with unusual excitement that cold November evening. Elvis Presley's personal belongings hanging on the walls had brought together the biggest collectors in the music world. But the real star of the evening was the 1954 Martin D28 guitar displayed under special lighting at center stage. This wasn't just any guitar. It was the one Elvis used in his first studio recordings, the one he recorded That's All Right with, one of the most important instruments in music history. As auctioneer James Whitmore took the microphone, the tension in the room became palpable. "Ladies and gentlemen, we come to this evening's most special piece. From Elvis Presley's personal collection, with an estimated value of £2 million. While Whitmore introduced the guitar with flowery words, someone sat in the back of the room wearing a wide hat and dark sunglasses. Ozzy Osbourne, despite being 75 years old, still carried that rebellious edge. Sharon wasn't in the seat beside him. He'd come alone tonight. If I told Sharon, she'd say, "Ozzy, you're going to spend £2 million on a guitar when you can't even play one," he muttered to himself in that familiar Birmingham accent. "But this is Elvis's guitar, isn't it? That man was my hero." Ozzy's eyes were fixed on the guitar. This wasn't just shopping. This was a pilgrimage. Elvis was the first spark of Ozzy's love for music. Growing up in Birmingham's working-class neighborhoods in the 1960s, Elvis's voice had shown him that a different world was possible. Just then, there was movement at the other end of the room. Mick Jagger, the Rolling Stones' legendary frontman, was entering the corridor with his characteristic walk. Despite being 80 years old, he still carried that magnetic presence. In his Armani suit, with carefully styled hair, he surveyed his surroundings with typical Jagger confidence. When he spotted Ozzy, that familiar smirk appeared on his face. "Well, well, well," he said, that familiar Cockney accent audible in his tone. "Look what the cat dragged in. Ozzy bloody Osbourne." As the distance between the two rock legends closed, the room turned its attention to them. Everyone was curious to see how this unexpected encounter would unfold. "Mick Jagger!" Ozzy stood up, adjusting his hat. "What are you doing here, mate?" "Sharon sent you to keep an eye on me." Jagger laughed. "Actually, I'm here for the same reason as you, I suspect. That beautiful Martin over there." Both men looked at the guitar, and suddenly the atmosphere between them changed. Friendship gave way to competition. "Oh, come on, Mick." There was slight irritation in Ozzy's voice. "You've got enough guitars to open a bloody museum. This one means something special to me." Jagger raised an eyebrow, that mischievous smile widening. "Special? Ozzy, darling, we both know neither of us can actually play the bloody thing, but that's not the point, is it?" The auctioneer continued over the microphone. "This isn't just an instrument. The first songs Elvis recorded with this guitar laid the foundation of rock and roll." Ozzy and Mick looked at each other, both understanding the guitar's historical importance. "Look, Ozzy," Jagger lowered his voice, "I've been collecting Elvis memorabilia for decades. This guitar would complete my collection perfectly." Ozzy shook his head, his determination growing. "And I've been dreaming of owning something that belonged to the king since I was 16 years old, working in that bloody slaughterhouse in Birmingham. This isn't just about collecting, Mick. This is about completing a circle." Both had the same hunger in their eyes, but for different reasons. "Bidding will start at £500,000, the auctioneer's voice echoed across the room. Ozzy and Mick automatically raised their hands. "Oh, this is going to be interesting," Jagger whispered, but loud enough for Ozzy to hear. "600,000, the auctioneer continued. Both hands remained up. The rest of the room focused on watching the battle between these two legends. 700,000, 800,000. As the numbers climbed, both their facial expressions began to change. Ozzy's casual demeanor gave way to serious determination. "Mick," he whispered, "maybe we should talk about this like gentlemen." Jagger answered without taking his eyes off the guitar. "Oh, I intend to be a perfect gentleman, Ozzy. A perfectly victorious gentleman. £1.2 million. The auctioneer's voice now carried an excited tone. This bidding war had taken an unexpected turn. The other potential bidders in the room had long since given up. Now it was just the battle between two rock legends. Ozzy's hand trembled slightly, not just from the magnitude of the money, but from the emotional investment. "You know what, Mick?" he said with sudden clarity. "This is bloody ridiculous. We're two old rockers fighting over a guitar neither of us can play, when we should be celebrating the man who inspired us both." Jagger looked surprised. This was a philosophical approach he hadn't expected from Ozzy. "What are you suggesting?" he asked curiously. Ozzy suddenly stood up, completely capturing the room's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, raising his voice, "I'd like to say something." The auctioneer paused. This was an unprecedented situation. "That guitar there," Ozzy pointed to the guitar, "belongs to the king. And the king wouldn't want two old fools like us fighting over his memory." A slight murmur rose from the room. "So here's what I propose." Ozzy turned to Jagger. "We buy it together. Joint ownership. We can display it in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame where it belongs. What do you say, Mick?" Shock appeared on Jagger's face, then admiration, then that familiar smile. "Ozzy Osbourne, you magnificent bastard. That's the most sensible thing I've heard all evening." The auctioneer continued in a confused voice. "Current bid stands at $1.2 million. Ozzy and Jagger looked at each other, then simultaneously raised their hands. $1.3 million, but as joint bidders," Ozzy announced loudly. The room's murmur grew louder. This was an entirely unprecedented situation. The auctioneer had a panicked, quick consultation with the organizers. This is highly unusual," he said into the microphone. "But if both parties agree to joint ownership..." Jagger stood up, standing beside Ozzy. "We agree. Elvis's guitar should unite, not divide. That's what the king would have wanted." The two legends' handshake received spontaneous applause from the room. If only this story had ended happily here. But a few hours later, the offer that would come from Jagger's mouth would completely turn this beautiful friendship story upside down. While the paperwork was being completed, Ozzy and Jagger were having a quiet conversation in the corner. "You know, Ozzy," Jagger spoke in a thoughtful tone, "this feels right. Elvis brought us all together. The Beatles, the Stones, Black Sabbath. We're all his children in a way." Ozzy nodded, his eyes still fixed on the guitar. "When I first heard Hound Dog on the radio in Birmingham, I thought, bloody hell, if that's what music can do, I want to be part of it. By the way, I should tell Sharon about this joint purchase." Ozzy suddenly realized. "She's going to kill me." A few hours later, the two rock legends were sitting in the George Tavern, one of London's oldest pubs. Elvis's guitar sat safely in its special case on the table between them. At that moment, Jagger's expression suddenly changed. "Actually, Ozzy," he said, leaning forward, "I was thinking about this joint ownership matter on our way here." The way he said it set off alarm bells in Ozzy's head. He'd heard that tone before, in board meetings, contract negotiations, those moments when art became business. "What exactly do you mean?" Ozzy asked cautiously, slowly placing his beer on the table. Jagger's eyes took on that calculating look that had made him one of rock's most successful businessmen for decades. "We both know this guitar is worth far more than what we paid together. Market value fluctuates, but I know a private collector in Tokyo who's specifically looking for this exact piece." Ozzy felt his blood pressure rising, that familiar sensation when his temper was about to flare. "Mick, you can't be serious about this," he started, but Jagger casually raised his hand and cut him off. "I'm suggesting we could easily double our investment, maybe even triple it if we play our cards right. Think rationally, Ozzy. We're two rock stars who can't play guitar. What are we really going to do with it long term?" The casual way Jagger said this, as if he was discussing stock options rather than Elvis's legacy, made Ozzy's jaw clench. "It'll just sit in one of our houses gathering dust. At least this way we both profit significantly." Jagger continued, warming to his theme. "The collector in Tokyo, Hiroshi Yamamoto, has a private museum. Temperature-controlled, perfect preservation conditions. The guitar would be better cared for than either of us could manage." But something in Jagger's tone told Ozzy This wasn't about preservation at all. Ozzy suddenly stood up. "Mick, you complete fool!" Ozzy's voice carried that dangerous edge it got when he was truly angry, not just irritated. "This isn't about money. This was never about bloody money." His Birmingham accent became more pronounced with emotion. Jagger seemed visibly unaffected by Ozzy's reaction, which only made things worse. "Come on, Ozzy. In the end, isn't everything about money? We're businessmen as much as we are artists. Always have been. Do you think I survived 50 years in this industry by getting emotionally attached to every old piece of memorabilia?" This comment hit Ozzy like a physical blow. He stood there, staring at Jagger, feeling decades of respect and admiration crumbling in real time. "You know what, Mick? I thought tonight changed something between us. I thought we'd learned something important about friendship, about honoring the legends who came before us." Ozzy's voice was getting louder, drawing more attention from other pub patrons. "But apparently, you're still the same calculating bastard you always were." He reached for the guitar case, clutching it protectively against his chest. "Some things in this world are more important than profit margins and investment returns." As Ozzy was about to leave, Jagger finally stood up and asked, "Where are you going?" The confident businessman facade was cracking, revealing genuine concern underneath. Ozzy turned back, his eyes blazing with disappointment and righteous anger. "I'm going home to my wife, who actually understands what loyalty and integrity mean, and I'm taking Elvis with me." The possessive way he said it made Jagger step forward. "Wait a minute, Ozzy. We have a legal agreement here. Joint ownership means joint decisions. You can't just walk away with property that belongs to both of us." This was always Jagger's fallback when emotional arguments weren't working. Legal language. This was supposed to be a partnership, remember? But Ozzy had heard enough corporate speak for one lifetime. "Legal agreement?" he interrupted, the disgust clear in his voice. "You want to talk legal? Fine. I'll buy out your share right here, right now. Name your price, Mick. Whatever number is floating around in that business-obsessed brain of yours." Jagger paused, clearly caught off guard by the directness of the offer. He'd expected negotiation, compromise, the usual back and forth of business deals, but Ozzy was offering to end the partnership entirely, right here in a London pub. "It's not that simple, Ozzy. The paperwork, the legal implications." Jagger started, but his voice lacked conviction. Ozzy slowly shook his head, profound sadness beginning to replace the anger. "No, Mick. You're making it complicated because you've forgotten what this is really about." He gestured to the guitar case he was holding. "This guitar doesn't belong to us. It belongs to Elvis's memory, to rock and roll history, to every kid who picks up an instrument and dreams of becoming a star." The emotional weight in his voice was undeniable, and you've just proven that you don't understand what any of that means anymore. Then, instead of storming out dramatically as everyone expected, Ozzy did something completely unexpected. He carefully placed the guitar case on the table and slowly opened it. Elvis's 1954 Martin D28 guitar gleamed under the pub's warm, amber lighting, its aged wood telling stories of countless hours of music-making. The entire establishment fell silent. Conversation stopped mid-sentence, glasses paused halfway to lips. Even the kitchen noise seemed to fade. "Look at this beautiful instrument," Ozzy said, his voice now carrying to every corner of the now silent pub. "This guitar was with Elvis when he walked into Sun Records in Memphis on July 5, 1954. It was there when he recorded That's All Right with Scotty Moore and Bill Black." His hand hovered over the guitar, not quite touching it, treating it with the reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. Ozzy continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "This wasn't just music. This was the birth of rock and roll. Elvis grew up in poverty in Tupelo, Mississippi, just like I grew up poor in Aston, Birmingham. They never had enough money, never knew where the next meal was coming from. But this guitar," he gestured reverently, "this guitar represented hope. It represented dreams. It represented the idea that a poor kid with nothing but talent and determination could change the world." Several patrons were visibly moved, some wiping away tears. "And you," he turned to look directly at Jagger, You want to sell those dreams to some private collector who'll lock it away in a climate-controlled room where nobody can see it, nobody can be inspired by it. Jagger stood frozen by his table. The confident rock star who had dominated stages for 60 years suddenly looked small and uncertain. "You're right," he said quietly. "I'm sorry, Ozzy." I don't know what came over me, but Ozzy wasn't ready to accept the apology yet. The disappointment ran too deep. "You know what the real difference is between us, Mick?" Ozzy asked, his voice still carrying that edge of hurt. "You've always seen music as a business that happens to involve art. I've always seen it as art that happens to involve business. That's why you'll never truly understand what this guitar represents." Jagger's face flushed with a mixture of shame and frustration. "So what happens now?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. "You're just going to take the guitar and walk away from our agreement?" The question hung in the air, and Ozzy could see the fear in Jagger's eyes. Not fear of losing money, but fear of losing respect, of being remembered as the man who tried to sell Elvis's legacy. "Are you going to sue me? Turn this into some ugly public legal battle?" Ozzy looked at him and realized that Jagger had been a friend, despite their differences. The anger was fading, replaced by something deeper and more painful. "No, Mick," he said slowly, carefully closing the guitar case. "I'm not going to sue you. I'm going to do what we should have done from the very beginning, what would properly honor Elvis." The next morning, music news outlets worldwide carried an unprecedented story as their headline. Ozzy Osbourne had donated Elvis Presley's 1954 Martin D28 guitar to the Graceland Museum in Memphis, with the stipulation that it be permanently displayed in Elvis's childhood home exhibit and that visitors could see it for free. When reporters reached out to Mick Jagger for comment, his response was uncharacteristically brief and humble. "Ozzy did the right thing. I clearly lost sight of what was important. Sometimes it takes a true friend to remind you of your values." The guitar now sits in a place of honor at Graceland, where hundreds of thousands of visitors see it each year.